impi chirianista ya kusaranga ya kumana baisa mugutube paika chirianista ya kusaranga ya kwana baisa mugutube.
It's Friday, so we kickstart episode 1 of our 2026 election tips and insights as promised. So in today's episode, we are going to focus on 3 key aspects of the elections. And these are, number 1, we are going to discuss why elections. Why do we hold elections? Why are we discussing elections now? And the second aspect will focus on the legal framework that guides or stipulates how and why elections should be held in Zambia. And the last aspect of today's episode, we will give a highlight of some of the key statistics just to give you the country outlook for 2026 elections. It's important to know the numbers, to know the figures, so that as we go into this election process, you are not lied to or cheated by anyone. So those are the 3 aspects that we're going to focus on today's episode of the tips and insights for 2026 elections with me, Kabanse. To start with, why elections? Let's answer the question, why elections in Zambia? Number 1, or the starting point, is that Zambia is a democracy. Zambia is a democracy. And by definition, remember, we say that democracy is a system of government that puts the people at the center. Okay? It's the system of government that puts the people at the center. Or simply defined, remember our old school definition that democracy is simply government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Remember that? Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Therefore, it is only through an election that the will of the people, that the will of the people is practically seen or felt. In religious term, would probably simply say voting is a way of saying, let my will for Zambia be done. Let my will for this country be done. So that is the reason why we have elections. In summary, we would focus on a few important aspects, on why elections are important. Number 1, it's only through elections that we ensure the legitimacy of the government. Governments or governance legitimacy is only derived through elections. So through elections, as the citizens, you and me, we authorize the representatives to govern on our behalf. We authorize those elected officials to be able to govern and to be able to hold office on our behalf. And it is only through an election that we achieve that. Secondly, elections enable us, the citizens, to take part in the shaping of our common future. It is only through elections that we elect officials that we know are going to represent us. They are going to pass policies that are going to benefit us and our children and our children's children in future. For example, through an election, we are able to vote for a government that is going to prioritize, for example, free education, because we know this is a policy that is going to benefit us as a people, as a citizenry of this country. The other point to note is that it is the only way that we hold our representatives in check. So through an election, we are able to make sure that those people that we like, we give them the mandate to govern. And those that we feel do not represent our aspirations as a people, as a citizenry, we kick them out. So it's only through a democracy that we are able to hold them accountable. Ngati kansela oro MP senzo tikondweresa sarugwira ntchito momwe tiri ukondweresa momwe tiri ufunira isengati nzika za mziko lino ya Zambia. Kuvota, when we cast that vote, tiruwauza kuti imwe pitirizani ntchito yomwe muri kugwira ni yabwino. Oro imwe situru kufunani itamaishi bokuomba twalame funyapo pampando tubike po muntumbi. And also, it's only through an election that we are able to hold government and ensure that our government is responsible. If we don't have elections, ngatitiziwa kuti ukankhala mboma ni muyayaya then people are not going to perform because they know no one is going to kick them out. But when we have an election, when we vote, then we are going to make sure that those government officials are on their toes. They are going to work, they are going to make sure that they implement their manifesto to the glory of the people of this country. So basically, that's the only way that we are going to make sure that government is responsive and they are doing that which they promise that they are going to do for us as a people, because they know if they don't do that, we are going to kick them out. So basically, that is why we hold elections in Zambia. So how do we hold these elections? One thing that is important to remember is that people don't just wake up and say, oh, lelo, tinkale na election, tivotere president winangu, or tivotere councillor winangu, or tivotere MP winangu. No. There are laws that govern when and how the elections are going to be held. The first one and most important is the Constitution of Zambia. The Constitution prescribes and describes how an election is going to be held. Okay. Secondly, we have the Electoral Commission Act number 25 of 2016, which contains provisions for the administration of the ECZ, how the Electoral Commission of Zambia is going to be run, what is the composition of the Electoral Commission of Zambia, which is a legal organ mandated to conduct elections in this country. Secondly, we have the Electoral Process Act. And the Electoral Process Act basically just stipulates the process of holding the polls. How are the polls held and what is the process? And it clearly defines the step-by-step process of how elections should or will be held in this country. We also have electoral regulations or different regulations that provide for electoral procedures, voter registration, voter education, a referendum, if we are going to have a referendum. We also have the Referendum Act, which is important in a year or at a time when we want to hold a referendum, especially when we are about to repeal the Bill of Rights in our constitution, then we need to hold a referendum. So we have the Referendum Act that defines when and how a referendum should be held. So talking about Article 47 of our constitution, or our constitution prescribing elections, it's important to remember that according to the Zambian constitution, the electoral system in Zambia is in twofold. Okay? The first thing to remember is that elections to the office of the president shall be or will be or are conducted directly under the majoritarian electoral system. What that means is that the winning candidate, the winning presidential candidate in Zambia must receive at least more than 50% of valid votes for them to be declared a winner of that particular election. That's why we say you need to get at least 50 plus 1 of the votes cast. So, for example, if there are 1,000 people that are voting for a president, for a president to win, they should at least get 501 of the votes cast for them to be declared the winner for that particular election. In an event that there is no winner, then we are supposed to go for a rerun within 30 days of casting the first ballot. So if there is no outright winner in 2026, if say Hagainde Hijilema and maybe another candidate, for argument's sake, Mr. Muriokela, none of them gets the 50% plus 1 required for the vote, then we are going to go for a rerun within 30 days where the top 2 candidates are going to battle it out until we have one of them getting 50% plus 1 to be declared the winner for that particular election. However, an election to the National Assembly, to the local government, for mayors, for councillors, for council chairpersons, are conducted under what we call the first past the post. Simply a simple majority. So meaning a candidate who gets the highest number of votes cast in an election, regardless of whether it's 50% or whether it's 50 plus 1, it doesn't matter. As long as you've gotten slightly more than the candidate who is second, then you are declared the winner. So those are the two systems that we use in Zambia for the election. So remember, for the president, you have to pour at least 50% plus one of the vote. However, for MP, councillor, mayor, council chairperson, and all these other people that we vote for, it's a simple majority. And simply by getting more than the other candidates, then you are declared the winner for that particular election. The last thing I want us to discuss in this episode is simply some of the key statistics. Talking about the statistics for this year's election, we have a total of 8,786,300 registered voters. 8,786,300 registered voters. And of the total registered voters, we have a total of 4,665,431 female voters. 4,665,431 registered female voters. And the number of registered voters this year is actually higher than the number of male voters, because for male voters, we only have 4,120,869. That's 4,120,869 male registered voters. And remember, Zambia now has 10 provinces, and we have a total of 116 districts. And one other important figure to note is that this year the number of constituencies has significantly increased from the usual that we know of about 160 constituencies. Now we have 226 constituencies. So we have 226 constituencies where we are going to be voting for MPs. So we are going to vote for a total of 226 members of parliament come 13th August 2026. Another important statistic to note is that we have 1,856 wards. 1,856 wards where we are going to be voting for councillors. And we have a total of 13,529 polling stations. 13,529 polling stations. If you remember last year, we only had about 8,900 polling stations, but the number of polling stations this year has significantly increased from about 8,900 last year to about 13,529 polling stations this year. So these are very, very important numbers that we should remember going into this year's elections, so that you are not manipulated or lied to by anyone who may give you false figures or false information. So, as we move forward and as we wait for the next episode, remember why we are going to the polls this August. Remember why we are voting. We are voting because it's the only way to let your will be done for this country, for Zambia. So voting or participating in an election is the only way you are going to say, let my will for Zambia be done. So it's important that we all get ready and make sure that we vote if you're a registered voter. Thank you so much for your time, and we speak to you again next time in the next episode, where we are going to be talking about the key electoral staff or electoral stakeholders for this year's election. My name is Derobby Kabanse. We speak to you again next time. Have yourselves a great one. Thank you.